Howdy everyone, wanted to make a semi-quick video of just kind of what I do with my Era when I'm cleaning it, but also just kind of like some tips and tricks for the Era. I've gone through several Eras at this point. From my understanding, I haven't had any issues with them after I touch them. I do know that there is some discrepancy on what like some techs do to the Era. I think they're trying to optimize its performance, but what I'm finding is that when you're removing certain seals and things like that, users are running into the situation where they're really not entirely sure how to support their own marker because it deviates from the manual of arms a little bit. That said, even though maintenance-wise should be practically the same, I think users are feeling less confident after some of those techs do those certain things, and it leads just to some issues that are pretty easily solved. So I'm just going to kind of go through how I have my Era set up. I have tried the Bernoulli bolt. I have tried different bolt configurations. I do have my favorite, but I'm not really gonna make note of that. I will say I do not use the Bernoulli bolt on a normal basis. I tend to like a more stock configuration, but you know, I got my little preferences. If you have any questions on that, please feel free to ask me, but let's go ahead and get into it. I mean, this is my Era. I have shot this thing so much. It has done me so well. I have baked parts to khaki, and I lost an ASA knob and threw the shocker, my shocker amp ASA knob on there. So yeah, I mean, this thing has been through a little bit through the ringer, but it is still going strong. I have been so impressed with this marker. So let's get into it. So right off the very get-go, what I like to do is I like to take off this can on the back. And what we'll find is a lot of times the spool stem will come out with it, and that's totally okay. What you don't want is it to stick really bad, right? So this took hardly any force to kind of pop out, but I have had some that are really stuck in there and I have to, you know, really yank it out. This one wasn't too bad. Then I like to pull that out, set it to the side, and then just continue the disassembly of the bolt itself. I do get some users asking me about this piece, and this is just the bolt guide. And what I like and what I tell them, it's, you know, just pull on it with a little bit of a bend, a little bit of a twist, and you should hear it pop out. Whenever it comes time to put everything back together, whenever it's pretty much reverse order, you make sure you push it in real good and hear a click. Right? So that's pretty simple. So again, you pull and kind of give it a little bit of a twist, a little bit of a bend off that axis there. Now, you don't necessarily have to go through this. I have had one Era come to me that was kind of shooting sporadically with electro and mech frame, didn't matter what. That is most likely going to be the valve down in that cap. And what I like to do is to get a pick. This is really the only thing I would recommend using a pick on this. And there's some air pathways on that valve in there. And you just kind of want to find one, latch into it, and pull. And the whole assembly will come out. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Just be careful not to scratch it up too much, not damage it too much. See there, these are the airways, right? So that's what I'm latching onto. You don't necessarily want to damage this area too much because the stem does go down here and create a seal, and this is where you could see yourself getting some sporadic firing. Just change out these seals, make sure these seals are good as well, and you should be good to go. If this piece does get overtly damaged with grime, dirt, or anything, you may have to replace that. I have yet to have to do that on any amp that I've touched, so that's no big deal. I would recommend you remove the bolt seal, the breech seal O-ring on the bolt. It's not really necessary, but it does help with the longevity with that particular O-ring. And you can sometimes start hearing some leaking down the barrel if this kind of starts going out prematurely. So if you want to kind of increase the longevity of that O-ring, make sure you take it off before you press it through there. I'm probably not going to do that. I'm just going to go for it. And there we go. So, I mean, pretty much that is completely disassembled as far as I would really go when it comes to general maintenance. So, again, it's pretty much reverse order, but first thing I like to do is literally get everything as clean as possible. So one good spot to check on the this bolt guide here is way down in there, all the way up to that cone. You're gonna probably get some accumulation of dirt and grease. So we want to make sure we get up in there with either a Q-tip or, you know, roll up the corner of your microfiber and really shove it in there. It's generally what I do because I always forget to get my Q-tip. So not a big deal, but I'm looking pretty clean in there. Now again, this back valve here, you're really not going to have to go through much unless you are having issues. This is one of those things where I would pretty much leave it alone for the most part. But I am going to inspect it, make sure I ain't got no nicks anywhere. It doesn't look like I got nothing. I'm looking pretty clean. But, you know, just kind of get down there, clean up some stuff. I have seen people complain about this spring not sitting very straight. That's okay. There is a recess in the back of the spool stem that will align that fine. I haven't noticed any extra friction or anything like that regarding the spring. Has been pretty much a non-issue from my experience. The spring, it is just a friction fit down on a little stem at the bottom of the valve, so we can just push that on. Might be a little difficult. Try a different side. There we go. I think one side is tapered, so just be aware of that when it comes to the spring. Let's continue to clean. Now this, this can piece here, there are two seals that I see people without, and that is a small O-ring, a very thin O-ring right there on the edge. And let's see if I can get it to focus. Come on now. So see this O-ring here, it actually sits deep in this particular lip here. And I have seen techs pull that O-ring out, and I have seen techs pull the O-ring off of the bolt guide, this bottom O-ring here. What I find is, though it makes it easier to maintain because you're not having to unclick this as hard, it actually just kind of free float sits in there, right? Which I think for operation isn't terrible. But what I think might happen, and I'm not entirely sure, this is just my working theory, that the stem will actually become more compressed into the bolt guide more. And without this O-ring, without that even smaller O-ring on this can piece here, kind of pressing this bolt guide a little more forward, I feel like this piece compresses and sticks more into the guide, which is where I see most people having issues. And the symptom of that is you go to pull the trigger and you just hear a little light puff of like air, just a little puff, puff, puff. And you know, if I'm at a chrono with somebody and their gun is doing that, I'll degas their gun, pull out this piece, just plop it out real hard. You know, get any excess lube, kind of lube this area, and then plop it back in, and it normally is fine, right? But I feel like if there is a weak point with this system, it is the friction between this spool stem and the bolt guide, and that's what we want to mitigate as much as possible. I feel like this O-ring here within the can and this O-ring here applies forward pressure to the bolt guide, enough so to help mitigate that particular issue. So additionally, you have this O-ring here to help with cold weather. You can kind of, that's not good. To help with you know, the cold weather, you can move it into the rear configuration. I did do some initial testing on this and got, I think, a little bit of a drop in efficiency, just because it actually does bring down your FPS down by about 10 FPS on average from what I saw. And then you have to crank up your reg, and so you're losing a little bit of that air efficiency. I think it's a very negligible amount. It does make it have a little bit more visceral shot, but that's me really nitpicking. I don't think you're really going to notice as much of a difference with this on normal use. Maybe during cold weather use. However, I've had more issues with paint giving me issues on cold weather than this marker in its normal configuration. So I've yet to really feel the need to move this O-ring, but it is a nice option, and I can tell that it does you know, adjust the airflow within the marker. Fairly certain it does what they claim. So fun fact, not only does the ASA knob for the amp fit the Era, but the back cap as well. So you can put an amp back cap on the Era. Now, do people necessarily like it? I think that's really personal preference. The Era back cap does move it forward a little bit. I feel like the amp did kind of protrude a little farther back. So I think most players are more comfortable shooting this. However, when it comes to maintaining, I still like the amp back cap. It just kind of, it works better. Like, there's more to grab onto rather than these little edges here. But this is a very nice low profile option. I would like to see a company come through and make some custom faced back caps. That would be pretty cool, if I do say so myself. Okay, I think we got everything cleaned up. I'm gonna hit it with some lube. Now, back in the olden times, spool valve markers, people were always told to, you know, relax on the lube and don't over lube your marker. I find that not to be the case with the Shocker amp and Era. More so the Era than the amp, but for this valve back here, I mean, we're gonna apply some, right? But it's not gonna be too terribly much on these outer O-rings. We're just wanting to make sure we get a good seal on that. So we're going to just kind of place that there. We're going to press that down. And what I will do is use the stem to press that down, all the way down. I didn't feel any grittiness or anything like that. So let me wipe off some of that excess. You want to assemble this piece independently, these two. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I am going to put a very light amount of lube here just to help seal that one O-ring on the can. And I am going to do similar, very conservative amount on this one. Again, these are passive. These are passive O-rings. They're not, you know, dynamic. They're not going to be running around. So, and then we're going to just click it in. Push, click. So you kind of give it a little test tug, and you know you're on the money. So we are good there. Now what we'll do is this piece. So the stem, what I like to do for the stem is back here, I like to give a good little glob, right? So you kind of have a little reference there. Let's see if we can, yeah, there you go. But additionally, when it comes to these two O-rings up in the front here, I really like to glob that on and really get those in there. Now this is where people are like, oh no, there's way too much lube for it. I find this to work best, and I do like to go up and down the shaft there and really kind of get a nice coating on that. Right. Then I like to put that one there and get it lined up on the valve, and then we will put this piece on okay. So from here, pretty self-explanatory. If there is a piece you do want to go a little conservative with, it would be the bolt. You don't necessarily want a crap ton of lube chunking in your breech here. But, you know, so we'll kind of get some on here, a little bit of light, a very light kind of coating on the outside. I like to get a little bit on the inside. And I'll kind of show you what I do here in a moment when it comes to making sure we're going to stay accurate. I like to lube this O-ring here independently as well. Not too much again, but enough so that whenever we push through, you know, it doesn't take a whole bunch of force. I will say this is probably a little too much here, so grab a little bit more lube, throw it in. Give me a nice little film on the inside with that lube. Probably did a little too much, it's not a big deal. But that's much easier, much easier. Additionally, we got to lube up these two O-rings here. This isn't, again, not terribly crazy amounts. But don't skimp on it, you know. You can go a little too much with this marker, I found, and still be okay. All right, whenever I put my bolt can, my bolt and front can assembly on, I like to actually bring the bolt out a little bit and then start threading it on. You're just fighting less friction there. You may have to get your microfiber here to make sure it screws in all the way. Once you get some threads in there, feel free to push that down. All right, and then just kind of give it a nice little twist here. Before I put it back in the marker, I like to use a barrel swab. Go all the way through, kind of give her the old once over. Get through there, go through the breech. Really inspect it down there. Make sure I don't got any crazy debris or nothing. And then before we plop it back in, just to make it a little easier on us, these are static, so we can kind of glob these a little bit. They're not really going to be pushing a whole heck ton of stuff. These are just kind of to seal the whole unit on the outside, so and go make sure our retention is twisted to the left. Slap it in, twist to the right, and there we go. We should be golden. One thing I tend to do is I like to clear my breech of any oil. So what I'll do is I'll grab my tank, screw it in, air up, make sure we're good. Yeah, we golden. Turn on the marker, double click for eyes off, and then I just kind of put my hand over the edge, over the front. Should hurt a little bit. That's how you know you're hitting about 300. Then so what that does is that pretty much just shoots any residual grease and stuff kind of through the marker, get it working through, and well, keep it from coating some paintballs and stuff, and keep your breech pretty clean. So what I'll do now for good measure is I'll pull this back out, give the breech one more over, and there we go. That's how I like to clean my marker and make sure it's ready to go. Rain, sleet, snow, this thing has been awesome. So kind of wanted to go through a couple other things that I have found. This is a really simple one. You know, when you're messing with your gun and stuff and you're wanting to clean it all real good, a lot of times dirt and stuff will get up underneath the foregrip and such, and they have kind of implemented these kind of raised pieces that kind of lock the foregrip in place so it doesn't slide off, and it can really cause some people some headache to get it off. They end up putting stuff underneath here to try to lift it, and you don't need to do that. You simply just need to grab it firmly, twist about, 45 degrees, maybe even 90 degrees, and just slide it off. and it's that easy. So then you can get up underneath here and really clean up. Like, you got some junk right there I could probably mess with. And then get it back on, you kind of shimmy it on. I like to tilt it a little bit at that 45 again, press it, and just twist it back on. Let's open up the grips real quick. For the next tip, one thing that you may want to keep an eye on and address are the air transfer tubes. They are now kind of just a floating unit rather than Loctited in. And if you are switching back and forth between mech and electro, sometimes that can fall out or get stuck in one of the, in either the gun or the frame, and can make it hard to pull out. I always like to have my picks with me, right? So you can get up under there and pull it out. But what I actually really like to do is just put a extra glob of lube on the O-ring into the trigger frame. And what that does is provides extra friction on the trigger frame side, so whenever it essentially glues it to the frame without losing that free floating feature. So whenever I pull it out, and I do this on both my electro and my mechanical frame, so that whenever I take them out, I still check, but I have not had an issue with those coming out since. So it's just put a little extra lube, extra glob of lube on this O-ring into the trigger frame. Since we have the trigger frame off, one thing I did want to address is this retention lever here. When I got mine, it was not very positive, right? My amp, whenever you use this, there was a very satisfying click, and this did not have it, but now I get that nice solid click. Or it might be too hard for you to, actuate that lever. What you can do is take this unit essentially completely apart. And when you do that, you kind of expose this little piece here, well, that goes through this blue retaining unit. So basically there's a bend in this piece that goes through the retaining unit here. And if you just kind of adjust that bend a little bit, either make it more obtuse or more acute, it can affect the tension on this unit. If I remember right, I had to make mine a little more acute for it to actually give me that good positive click. One thing I tend to do is I run a 16-inch barrel. For me personally, I just like the way it points better. But one thing I definitely recommend, and I know some people are going to be, upset about this, is getting the Freak stainless steel kit. This does add a little bit of extra weight to the front of the marker, and does calm it down quite a bit. It did it to the amp as well. It does help alleviate some of the vibration that you may observe at the tip of the barrel. Aside from that, I really haven't had anything crazy. I did have one era come to me with the detents not assembled correctly. And what that was is the spring actually buckled in on itself, so there wasn't a lot of spring tension behind the detents, causing some inconsistent feeding issues. The only thing I would really like to be addressed is just more trigger options. This Deuce is nice, and the trigger is, I think, much better than the amp. However, the way they've set up this trigger is they kind of keep it from hurting the board, which is actually limiting its adjustability just a little bit. I tend to like a little more exaggerated kick forward on the bottom side when it comes to my triggers. Normally I can adjust that into the trigger, but because of the limited adjustment, doesn't allow me to kick it out just as far as I want. It's fine, it does okay for me, but that's just a personal preference on my point. These grips are straight from the amp. Even the ones on the website, from my understanding, are just from the amp kit, just the rear grip. I would also like to see a different kind of foregrip, maybe from Exalt. You know, I really enjoyed having the Exalt foregrip on the amp. Even though this one is larger, it's still not as exactly how I would like it. Would like to see someone come out with you know, a different foregrip cover. I think it's just sitting there waiting for it. But this thing has actually been incredibly solid. You really don't have to do much to it for it to take care of you. I know it's really really tempting for everybody to, but it's hard to beat it in its stock configuration. If you take care of it, make sure you lube it well. I've played with this a lot. I've abused this a lot. I've even thrown parts of it in the oven, and it is still perfectly fine. Anyway guys, thanks so much for watching. If you liked the video, like it. If you dislike it, dislike it. I couldn't care less either way, but I want you guys to have a wonderful day.